Marco's hands, small but strong, gripped the tiny steering wheel of his go-kart. Even at 8 years old, he felt the thrill, the rumble, the need for speed. The track, a simple loop of asphalt in his small Italian town, was his world. Other kids played soccer or video games, but Marco lived for racing. His kart, patched together from spare parts by his father, wasn't the fanciest. But Marco treated it like a Formula One car. He'd spend hours polishing the imaginary chrome, tightening every bolt, and dreaming of the day he'd trade this little engine for something much, much bigger. He wasn't just fast, he was smart. He understood the physics of racing, the way the tires gripped the road, how to take a corner just right to shave off precious seconds. He studied racing videos, memorizing the lines of his heroes, men like Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. He knew their wins, their losses, their every move. By the time he was a teenager, Marco was dominating the karting scene. Trophies lined his bedroom shelf, gleaming under the posters of his racing idols. He moved up the ranks quickly, from Formula 4 to Formula 3, each step a little faster, a little more dangerous. His talent was undeniable. Scouts noticed. Sponsors came calling. Soon, he was in Formula 2, the final stepping stone to his ultimate dream, Formula 1. The pressure was immense, but Marco thrived. He won races, set lap records, and consistently outperformed his more experienced rivals. He was known for his daring overtakes, his never-give-up attitude, and his infectious grin. He was a natural, a star in the making. People said he had it, that special something that separated the good drivers from the legends. Finally, the call came. An F1 team, a smaller but ambitious outfit, offered him a seat. Marco couldn't believe it. Years of hard work, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication had finally paid off. He was going to be a Formula One driver. He remembered the first time he sat in the cockpit of his F1 car. The carbon fiber seat molded perfectly to his body. The intricate array of buttons and switches on the steering wheel seemed overwhelming at first, but he quickly learned their function. He felt the raw power of the engine humming beneath him. This was it. This was his destiny. He was Marco, the kid from the small Italian town, and he was ready to take on the world. His first few races were a whirlwind. The speed, the G-forces, the competition, it was all more intense than he could have ever imagined. But he adapted quickly, learning from every race, every mistake. He scored points, impressed the team, and began to build a reputation as a fearless and talented driver. He was on his way to becoming something truly special. The Italian Grand Prix. Marco had dreamed of this race since he was a little boy watching the scarlet Ferraris scream around the legendary Monza circuit. Now, he was here, one of the drivers, about to compete in front of his home crowd. The atmosphere was electric. The stands were a sea of red, the color of Ferrari, but also the color of passion, the color of Italy. Flags waved, horns blared, and the roar of the crowd was deafening. Marco could feel the energy coursing through him, a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. This wasn't just any race. This was his home race, and he wanted to win it more than anything. He knew the track like the back of his hand, every turn, every bump, every breaking point. He had spent countless hours practicing, perfecting his line, pushing himself to the limit. The pressure was on. The team had high expectations. The sponsors were watching. And his family, his father, his mother, and his little sister, were in the stands, cheering him on. He couldn't let them down. The week leading up to the race was a whirlwind of media interviews, sponsor appearances, and team briefings. Marco tried to stay focused, to block out the distractions, but it was difficult. Everyone wanted a piece of him. Everyone wanted to talk to the young Italian sensation. He knew he had to stay calm, to stay focused, to trust his instincts. He had to remember why he was here, what he had worked so hard for. He had to remember the little boy in the go-kart, the boy who dreamed of racing in Formula One. During the qualifying session, Marco pushed his car to the absolute limit. He took risks, braked later than anyone else, and wrestled the car around the corners. He managed to secure a spot on the second row of the grid, a respectable position, but not quite what he had hoped for. He knew he had to get a good start, to gain positions in the first few corners. The start was crucial. It could make or break the race. He spent hours studying the data, analyzing his previous starts, trying to find any advantage he could. The night before the race, Marco couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, replaying the qualifying session in his mind, analyzing every detail. He tried to visualize the race, to imagine himself overtaking his rivals, to see himself crossing the finish line in first place. Finally, he drifted off to sleep, dreaming of victory. But even in his dreams, he could feel the pressure, the weight of expectations. He knew that tomorrow would be the biggest day of his life. He had to be ready. He would be ready. The lights turned on, 5 red beacons blazing above the track. Marco held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. The moment of truth. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes focused on the lights. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. Marco reacted instantly, launching his car off the line. He had a good start, one of the best of his career. He surged forward, passing one car, then another. He was up to 4th place before the first corner. The first few corners at Monza are notoriously tight and dangerous. Drivers jostle for position, pushing each other to the limit. Marco knew he had to be aggressive, but also cautious. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. As they approached the third corner, a fast right-hander, Marco saw an opportunity. The car in front of him, driven by his main rival, spun its tires slightly coming out of the previous corner. Marco saw his chance. He pulled alongside, preparing to overtake on the outside. It was a risky move, but he was confident he could pull it off. He had the speed, the skill, and the determination. But then, disaster struck. Another car, further back in the pack, made a late braking maneuver, causing a chain reaction. The car in front of that car swerved to avoid a collision, clipping Marco's front wing. In a split second, everything changed. Marco lost control of his car. The car veered sharply to the left, heading straight for the barrier. He tried to correct, to steer away from the wall, but it was too late. The impact was violent. The car slammed into the barrier at full speed, the force of the collision ripping through the chassis. Marco's head snapped back against the headrest. The world went black. The sound was deafening. A sickening crunch of metal, followed by the shattering of glass. The crowd gasped in horror. The race was immediately red-flagged. Marshals rushed to the scene, desperately trying to reach Marco. Smoke billowed from the wreckage. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and burning rubber. The safety crew worked frantically to extract Marco from the mangled remains of his car. It was a slow and painstaking process. They had to be careful not to cause further injury. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they managed to get him out. He was unconscious, his body limp and lifeless. They placed him on a stretcher and rushed him to the medical center. The atmosphere in the paddock was somber. Everyone was holding their breath, praying for Marco's safety. The race had become secondary. All that mattered was that Marco was okay. But deep down, everyone knew that the situation was serious. Very serious. The crash was replayed on the big screens, in slow motion, over and over again. Each time, it looked more and more horrific. It was a reminder of the inherent dangers of Formula One. A reminder that, in this sport, anything can happen. And sometimes, the consequences can be devastating. The silence in the medical center was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marco lay unconscious in a sterile white room, surrounded by beeping machines and concerned faces. His parents, his father strong but visibly shaken, his mother with tears streaming down her face, held each other tightly. His little sister clutched a worn-out teddy bear, her eyes wide with fear. The team principal, a stern but fair man named Mr. Rossi, paced nervously outside the room. He spoke in hushed tones with the doctors, his face etched with worry. The news wasn't good. Marco had suffered a severe concussion, multiple fractures, and internal injuries. His condition was critical. The hours that followed were agonizing. The doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Marco, monitoring his vital signs, running tests, and consulting with specialists. His family waited anxiously, clinging to any glimmer of hope. The media, of course, was in a frenzy. News of the crash had spread like wildfire, and reporters from all over the world were camped outside the hospital, desperate for any information. Rumors swirled about the severity of Marco's injuries, his chances of survival, and the future of his racing career. Mr. Rossi addressed the media, his voice grave. He confirmed that Marco was in critical condition but assured everyone that he was receiving the best possible care. He asked for privacy for Marco and his family during this difficult time. Inside the hospital room, time seemed to stand still. Marco remained unconscious, his fate hanging in the balance. His family stayed by his side, whispering words of encouragement, holding his hand, and praying for a miracle. The doctors warned them that the next 24 hours would be crucial. They didn't know if Marco would pull through. They didn't know if he would ever race again. The racing world held its breath. Drivers, teams, and fans alike sent messages of support and well wishes. Even Marco's rivals, the men he battled with on the track, expressed their concern and hoped for his speedy recovery. It was a stark reminder that, despite the fierce competition and the intense rivalries, they were all part of a community, a brotherhood of racers who shared a passion for speed and a respect for the dangers of their sport. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light through the hospital window, there was a small but significant change. Marco's vital signs began to stabilize. His breathing became more regular. His heart rate slowed down. It was a sign, a glimmer of hope. Marco was fighting. He wasn't giving up. He was still alive. But the road ahead would be long and arduous. His future was still uncertain. But for now, it was enough. He was alive. And that was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks. Marco slowly regained consciousness. The first thing he saw was his mother's face, etched with relief and exhaustion. He tried to speak, but his throat was sore and his voice was weak. "Marco," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "You're awake. You're going to be okay." He squeezed her hand weakly, trying to reassure her. He was alive, but he was far from okay. His body was a mess of aches and pains. He couldn't move his legs. He couldn't feel his arms properly. The doctors explained the extent of his injuries. The concussion had caused some memory loss. The fractures would take months to heal. And the internal injuries required extensive surgery. But the worst news was about his spine. The impact had damaged his spinal cord. They didn't know if he would ever walk again. They certainly didn't know if he would ever race again. Marco was devastated. Racing was his life. It was all he had ever known. The thought of never getting behind the wheel of a car again was unbearable. He sank into a deep depression. He refused to see visitors. He refused to eat. He refused to participate in his physical therapy. He just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, lost in his own thoughts. His family tried to cheer him up, but nothing seemed to work. His father told him stories about his own struggles and triumphs. His mother read him his favorite books. His little sister drew him pictures. But Marco remained withdrawn and despondent. He felt like his life was over. He had lost everything. Mr. Rossi visited him regularly, trying to encourage him to fight. He told Marco that the team was behind him, that they would support him every step of the way. He even promised him that his seat would be waiting for him when he was ready to come back. But Marco didn't believe him. He thought Mr. Rossi was just being kind. He couldn't imagine ever being able to race again. One day, a physical therapist came to his room. Her name was Elena. She was young, but she was also tough and determined. She had worked with many injured athletes before, and she knew how to push them to their limits. Elena didn't sugarcoat anything. She told Marco that his recovery would be long and difficult. She told him that he would have to work harder than he had ever worked before. But she also told him that it was possible. She told him that he could get back to racing if he was willing to put in the effort. Marco looked at her skeptically. He didn't think it was possible. But something about Elena's confidence and determination resonated with him. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could do it. Maybe he could race again. He decided to give it a try. He started working with Elena, pushing himself harder than he thought possible. It was painful and exhausting, but he refused to give up. He was determined to prove everyone wrong. He was determined to race again. The first few weeks of physical therapy were brutal. Marco had to relearn basic movements that he had taken for granted his entire life. He struggled to sit up in bed, to transfer to a wheelchair, to feed himself. Every movement was a challenge, a reminder of how much he had lost. Elena pushed him hard, but she also understood his pain and frustration. She celebrated his small victories, the first time he managed to lift his arm, the first time he wiggled his toes. She reminded him that progress was progress, no matter how small. There were days when Marco wanted to give up. Days when the pain was too intense, the frustration too overwhelming. Days when he felt like he was making no progress at all. On those days, Elena would tell him stories about other athletes she had worked with, athletes who had overcome seemingly impossible odds to return to their sports. She told him about a skier who had broken his back and gone on to win an Olympic gold medal. She told him about a basketball player who had torn his ACL and come back to become an all-star. These stories inspired Marco, reminding him that anything was possible if he was willing to work hard enough. He started to see his recovery as a race against his own body, a race against the odds. He began to set small goals for himself, goals that seemed impossible at first, but that he gradually achieved through hard work and determination. He learned to sit up for longer periods of time. He learned to transfer to a wheelchair without assistance. He learned to use his arms and hands with more dexterity. He also started to work on his mental strength. He practiced meditation and visualization, focusing on his goals, imagining himself back in the cockpit of a race car. He read books about overcoming adversity and achieving success. Slowly but surely, Marco began to regain his strength and his confidence. He started to believe that he could actually make a comeback. He started to see a future for himself, a future where he was back on the track, racing for the championship. His progress amazed the doctors and the therapists. They had never seen anyone recover so quickly from such a severe injury. They attributed his success to his incredible physical fitness, his unwavering determination, and the support of his family and friends. But Marco knew that it was more than that. It was his passion for racing, his love for the sport, that drove him to push himself to the limit. It was his dream of becoming a champion that kept him going, even when things seemed impossible. He still had a long way to go, but he was making progress every day. He was determined to prove everyone wrong. He was determined to race again. And he was confident that he would succeed. The journey was tough, but Marco was tougher. He would not be defeated. Despite the progress, doubt lingered like a shadow. Some days, Marco felt like he was running in place, putting in immense effort but getting nowhere. The pain was constant, a dull ache that never truly went away. He would push himself to his limit during therapy, only to collapse in exhaustion afterward, questioning if it was all worth it. He missed the roar of the engine, the feel of the steering wheel in his hands, the adrenaline rush of speed. He watched races on television, but instead of enjoying them, he felt a pang of envy and sadness. He saw his rivals competing, achieving success, while he was stuck in a hospital bed, fighting just to regain basic mobility. One evening, while watching a race, he saw his former teammate, the driver who had replaced him after the accident, win the race. The teammate celebrated on the podium, spraying champagne and basking in the adulation of the crowd. Marco felt a wave of bitterness wash over him. That could have been him. That should have been him. He turned off the television in disgust. He wheeled himself over to the window and stared out at the night sky. The stars seemed so distant, so unattainable. He felt a sense of isolation, a feeling that he was alone in his struggle. He started to question his dream of racing again. Was it realistic? Was he just deluding himself? Maybe he should just accept his fate, accept that his racing career was over. Maybe he should focus on something else, something less demanding, something less dangerous. He confided in Elena, telling her about his doubts and fears. She listened patiently, without interrupting. When he was finished, she looked at him with her unwavering gaze. "Marco," she said, "it's okay to have doubts. It's okay to be scared. What you're going through is incredibly difficult. But you can't let those doubts consume you. You can't let those fears control you." She reminded him of all the progress he had made, of all the obstacles he had overcome. She reminded him of his strength, his determination, his passion. "You are a racer, Marco," she said. "It's in your blood. It's who you are. You can't give up on your dream. You have to keep fighting." Her words resonated with him, but the doubt still lingered. He knew she was right, but it was hard to shake the feeling that he was fighting a losing battle. The possibility that he might never race again haunted him, casting a dark shadow over his recovery. He was frustrated, he was sad, and he was scared. But deep down, he knew he couldn't give up. Not yet. He had to keep trying. He had to keep fighting. Even if it seemed impossible. Even if he failed. He had to try. For himself. For his family. For his dream. One afternoon, Mr. Rossi came to visit, but he wasn't alone. He brought with him a young boy, no older than 10, named Leo. Leo was a huge Formula One fan, and Marco was his hero. Leo had been writing Marco letters since the accident, sending him drawings of race cars and messages of encouragement. Leo was shy and nervous, clutching a small, worn-out race car toy in his hand. He had lost his left leg to bone cancer a year prior. Marco, initially hesitant to see anyone, found himself drawn to Leo's genuine admiration and quiet strength. "Marco," Mr. Rossi said gently, "this is Leo. He wanted to meet you." Marco smiled weakly and extended his hand. "It's nice to meet you, Leo." Leo's eyes widened. He carefully shook Marco's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Hi, Marco. I hope you get better soon." "Thank you, Leo," Marco said. "That means a lot." Leo hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, hand-drawn picture. It was a picture of Marco's race car, speeding around a track, with the words, "Never give up," written in bold letters. "I drew this for you," Leo said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to have it." Marco took the picture and examined it closely. He was touched by Leo's thoughtfulness and his unwavering belief in him. He looked at Leo, really looked at him, and saw the same determination and resilience in his eyes that he was trying to find in himself. "This is amazing, Leo," Marco said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you so much. I'll keep it with me always." As Leo spoke of his own struggles, his surgeries, his therapies, and his determination to walk again with his prosthetic leg, Marco listened intently. He realized that Leo, despite his young age and his own challenges, was an inspiration to him. Here was a boy who had faced incredible adversity with courage and grace. A boy who refused to let his disability define him. A boy who still had hope, even when things seemed impossible. Marco spent the next hour talking with Leo, sharing stories and offering words of encouragement. He learned about Leo's love for racing, his favorite drivers, and his dream of one day becoming a race car engineer. As Leo was leaving, he turned to Marco and said, "You're my hero, Marco. You can do this. I know you can." Leo's words struck a chord within Marco. He realized that he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Leo, for all the people who believed in him, for all the people who needed a reason to hope. From that day on, Marco's attitude changed. He was still facing the same challenges, the same pain, the same doubts. But he now had a renewed sense of purpose, a renewed sense of hope. He had been reminded that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found. And sometimes, that light comes from the most unexpected sources. He would not let Leo down. He would not let himself down. He would keep fighting. He would keep pushing. He would come back. From that day forward, Marco's training intensified. He pushed himself harder than ever before, driven by a renewed sense of purpose and determination. His days were filled with grueling physical therapy sessions, hours of intense exercise, and unwavering focus. Elena designed a program tailored specifically to his needs, focusing on strengthening his weakened muscles, improving his balance and coordination, and restoring his range of motion. She incorporated a variety of exercises, from simple stretches and light weightlifting to more advanced techniques like hydrotherapy and electrical muscle stimulation. Marco attacked each workout with a fierce intensity. He would grit his teeth through the pain, pushing himself to the point of exhaustion, refusing to give up, refusing to be defeated. He visualized himself back in the cockpit of his race car, feeling the speed, the adrenaline, the thrill of competition. He spent hours working on his core strength, essential for maintaining stability in a race car. He did sit-ups, planks, and other exercises that targeted his abdominal and back muscles. He also worked on his neck strength, crucial for withstanding the G-forces experienced during racing. He used resistance bands and specialized equipment to strengthen his neck muscles, gradually increasing the resistance as he got stronger. He also focused on improving his hand-eye coordination and reaction time. He played video games that simulated racing, practicing his reflexes and sharpening his mental focus. He used a special machine that tested his reaction time, trying to improve his scores with each session. Outside of the therapy sessions, Marco dedicated himself to maintaining a healthy diet and getting plenty of rest. He ate nutritious meals, packed with protein, vitamins, and minerals, to fuel his body and support his recovery. He made sure to get at least 8 hours of sleep each night, allowing his body to repair and rebuild. He also continued to work on his mental strength, practicing meditation and visualization techniques to stay focused and positive. He listened to motivational speeches and read books about overcoming adversity, seeking inspiration from others who had faced similar challenges. Slowly but surely, Marco began to regain his strength and his physical abilities. He started to walk with the aid of crutches, then with a cane, and eventually, on his own. He regained his range of motion, his balance, and his coordination. He was still far from being race-ready, but he was making progress every day. He was proving to himself, and to the world, that he was not giving up. He was determined to come back, stronger and more determined than ever before. His body ached, his muscles screamed, but his spirit soared. He was Marco, the race car driver, and he would not be denied. He would race again. The fire within him burned brighter than ever. The day Marco finally sat behind the wheel of a race car again was a day he would never forget. It wasn't a Formula One car, not yet. It was a kart, similar to the one he had started with as a child. But it was a start. Mr. Rossi had arranged it for him, a secret test at a small, local karting track. Elena was there, along with his parents and sister. Leo, of course, was there too, his eyes wide with excitement. Marco felt a surge of emotion as he strapped himself into the kart. It felt familiar, like coming home. He turned the key, and the engine roared to life. The sound filled him with a sense of exhilaration he hadn't felt in months. He started slowly, cautiously, getting a feel for the cart. His muscles were stiff, his reflexes a little slow. But as he completed more laps, he started to regain his rhythm. The fear began to fade, replaced by a sense of confidence and joy. He gradually increased his speed, pushing the cart to its limit. He took the corners faster, braked later, and felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was back. He was a racer again. Over the next few months, Marco gradually increased his participation in karting, entering local races and building his confidence. He wasn't winning every race, but he was improving with each outing. He was proving to himself, and to everyone else, that he could still compete. He then moved on to Formula Ford, a step up from karting but still less demanding than Formula One. He spent hours practicing, learning the new car, and getting used to the increased speed and G-forces. He entered a few Formula Ford races, and while he didn't win, he showed flashes of brilliance. He had incredible car control, a natural feel for the track, and a fearless attitude. Mr. Rossi and the team were impressed with his progress. They saw that he was not only physically capable of racing again but that he also had the mental toughness and determination to succeed. They decided to give him a chance. They offered him a test in an older Formula One car, to see if he could handle the demands of the sport. Marco accepted the offer without hesitation. He knew that this was his chance to prove that he was ready to come back to Formula One. He trained harder than ever before, pushing himself to the limit, preparing for the biggest test of his life. The test was scheduled to take place at a private track in Spain. Marco arrived with his family and Elena, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. This was it. This was his moment. He had to prove that he could still do it. He had to show the world that he was back. The Formula One test in Spain went better than Marco could have ever hoped. He was fast, consistent, and showed no signs of fatigue. The team was impressed. Mr. Rossi offered him his seat back, a chance to return to Formula One. Marco accepted, but with a condition. He wanted to race at Suzuka, in Japan, one of the most challenging and demanding tracks on the calendar. It was a bold choice, but Marco wanted to prove that he was not afraid, that he was ready to face his fears head-on. The weeks leading up to the race were a whirlwind of media attention. Everyone wanted to know about Marco's comeback, his recovery, and his expectations for the race. He did his best to stay focused, to block out the distractions, and to prepare himself mentally and physically for the challenge ahead. He spent hours studying the track, analyzing every corner, every braking point, every possible overtaking opportunity. He worked with the team to fine-tune the car, making adjustments to the suspension, the aerodynamics, and the engine. He also spent time talking with Elena, discussing his fears and anxieties. She helped him to develop strategies for managing his emotions and staying calm under pressure. When he arrived at Suzuka, the atmosphere was electric. The fans were incredibly supportive, cheering him on and waving banners with his name on them. He could feel their energy, their belief in him. During the qualifying session, Marco drove brilliantly, pushing the car to its limit. He managed to secure a spot on the middle of the grid, a respectable position considering it was his first race back. The night before the race, Marco couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, replaying the qualifying session in his mind, analyzing every detail. He was nervous, but he was also excited. He was ready to race. On race day, the weather was perfect, sunny and warm. The track was dry and fast. Marco lined up on the grid, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around at the other drivers, his rivals, the men he had battled with before. He knew that they would not take it easy on him. They would push him to his limit. The lights turned on, 5 red beacons blazing above the track. Marco held his breath, his eyes focused on the lights. This was it. The moment of truth. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. Marco reacted instantly, launching his car off the line. He had a good start, gaining a few positions in the first few corners. He was back in the race, back in the fight. He was Marco, the race car driver, and he was ready to prove that he was still the best. He would show them all. Suzuka was a success. Marco finished in the points, a remarkable achievement for his first race back. But the season was far from over. He knew that he would face many challenges along the way. Some races were good, some were bad. He had mechanical failures, tire issues, and even a few collisions. He had moments of brilliance, overtaking several cars in a single lap, setting fastest lap times, and challenging for podium finishes. But he also had moments of frustration, making mistakes, losing positions, and struggling to keep up with the pace. The competition was fierce. The other drivers were not going to give him an inch. They saw him as a threat, a rival who had to be beaten. They pushed him to his limit, testing his skills and his mental fortitude. One race, in Monaco, he was involved in a controversial incident with his main rival, the driver who had replaced him after the accident. The two cars collided, sending both of them off the track. Marco was furious, accusing his rival of deliberately causing the accident. The incident was investigated by the race stewards, who ultimately ruled that both drivers were at fault. Marco was given a penalty, which cost him valuable points in the championship standings. He was frustrated and angry, but he knew that he couldn't let the incident affect him. He had to move on, to focus on the next race, to put the disappointment behind him. Another race, in Belgium, he had a mechanical failure that forced him to retire from the race. He was leading the race at the time, and a victory would have put him right back in contention for the championship. He was devastated by the retirement, but he refused to give up. He knew that there were still many races left in the season, and that anything could happen. He continued to train hard, to work with the team, and to stay focused on his goals. He knew that he had the talent, the determination, and the support to win the championship. He just had to keep fighting, to keep pushing, and to never give up. Elena was a constant source of support, helping him to manage his emotions, to stay positive, and to learn from his mistakes. She reminded him that setbacks were a part of racing, and that it was how he responded to those setbacks that would ultimately determine his success. Leo continued to send him letters and drawings, cheering him on and reminding him of his purpose. Marco knew that he was not just racing for himself. He was racing for Leo, for his family, for his team, and for all the people who believed in him. He would face whatever challenges came his way, with courage, determination, and unwavering belief in himself. He was Marco, the race car driver, and he would not be defeated. He would win. As the season progressed, Marco's fortunes began to change. He started to achieve more consistent results, finishing in the points race after race. He was driving with confidence, skill, and a renewed sense of purpose. The team made improvements to the car, fine-tuning the aerodynamics, the suspension, and the engine. Marco worked closely with the engineers, providing valuable feedback and helping them to optimize the car's performance. He also continued to work on his own physical and mental conditioning, pushing himself to the limit in training, and staying focused and positive. He knew that he had to be at his best if he wanted to compete for the championship. He started to score podium finishes, finishing second in Hungary and third in Italy. He was gaining momentum, slowly but surely climbing up the championship standings. His rivals started to take notice. They saw that he was a serious threat, a driver who was capable of winning races and challenging for the title. They began to race him harder, pushing him to his limit, trying to break his spirit. But Marco refused to be intimidated. He had faced adversity before, and he knew how to overcome it. He was determined to prove that he was the best, that he deserved to be champion. He won his first race of the season in Singapore, a thrilling victory that sent a message to the rest of the field. He followed that up with another win in Russia, and suddenly, he was right back in contention for the championship. The media went wild, hailing Marco's comeback as one of the greatest stories in Formula One history. Everyone was talking about his resilience, his determination, and his unwavering belief in himself. Leo was ecstatic, sending Marco a huge banner with the words, "You can do it," written in bold letters. Marco hung the banner in his garage, using it as a source of inspiration and motivation. Elena continued to provide invaluable support, helping him to manage the pressure, to stay focused, and to believe in himself. She reminded him that he had come so far, that he had overcome so much, and that he was capable of anything. As the season neared its end, the championship battle intensified. Marco was locked in a tight three-way fight with his main rival, the driver who had replaced him, and another experienced veteran. The final race of the season, in Abu Dhabi, would determine who would be crowned champion. The tension was palpable, the stakes were high, and the world was watching. Marco was ready. He had trained his entire life for this moment. He would give it everything he had. He would not be denied. He would be champion. Abu Dhabi. The final race. The championship decider. The atmosphere was electric, the tension palpable. The Yas Marina circuit glittered under the desert sun, a stage set for a dramatic showdown. Marco arrived at the track feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. He knew that this was the biggest race of his life, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. He qualified on pole position, a perfect start to the weekend. He had driven brilliantly, pushing the car to its limit, setting a lap time that no one else could match. His rivals qualified second and third, right behind him on the grid. The stage was set for a thrilling battle. The night before the race, Marco couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, replaying the qualifying session in his mind, analyzing every detail. He knew that the race would be long and demanding, and that he would have to be at his absolute best if he wanted to win. He spoke with Elena, who helped him to calm his nerves and to focus on the task ahead. She reminded him of all that he had accomplished, of all that he had overcome, and of all the people who were supporting him. He also spoke with Leo, who sent him a video message wishing him luck and telling him that he believed in him. Marco was deeply touched by Leo's support. On race day, the weather was perfect, sunny and warm. The track was dry and fast. The stands were packed with fans, all cheering for their favorite drivers. Marco lined up on the grid, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around at the other drivers, his rivals, the men he had battled with all season long. He knew that they would not give him an inch. The lights turned on, 5 red beacons blazing above the track. Marco held his breath, his eyes focused on the lights. This was it. The moment of truth. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The lights went out. Marco got a good start, launching his car off the line and maintaining his lead. He drove flawlessly for the first few laps, building a comfortable gap over his rivals. But then, disaster struck. On lap 10, he made a small mistake, running wide on a corner and losing valuable time. His rivals closed in, and the battle was on. For the next few laps, Marco fought tooth and nail, defending his lead with all his skill and determination. He knew that he couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The tension was unbearable. The crowd was on its feet, cheering and shouting. The world was watching, holding its breath. This was it. The championship was on the line. The battle raged on, lap after lap. Marco defended brilliantly, using all his skill and experience to hold off his rivals. He knew that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. One small error could cost him the championship. With just a few laps to go, the pressure was immense. Marco's tires were starting to wear, and his rivals were closing in. He knew that he had to push himself to the limit if he wanted to win. On the final lap, his main rival made a desperate attempt to overtake him, diving down the inside of a tight corner. Marco defended aggressively, forcing his rival to back off. He held his line, pushing the car to its absolute limit, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the finish line ahead, just a few hundred meters away. He crossed the finish line, just a fraction of a second ahead of his rival. He had done it. He had won the race. He had won the championship. The crowd erupted in a frenzy of cheers and applause. Marco had completed the most remarkable comeback in Formula One history. He had overcome a devastating injury, fought his way back to the top, and won the championship against all odds. He screamed with joy, punching the air with his fist. He had proven everyone wrong. He had shown the world that anything is possible if you believe in yourself and never give up. He pulled into the pits, where he was greeted by his team, his family, and his friends. They mobbed him, hugging him, and showering him with champagne. Mr. Rossi, his team principal, was in tears. He had believed in Marco from the beginning, even when others had doubted him. He was so proud of what Marco had accomplished. Elena was there, too, her eyes shining with pride. She had been his rock, his confidant, his inspiration. He hugged her tightly, thanking her for her unwavering support. And then, he saw Leo, standing at the edge of the crowd, waving his banner and beaming with joy. Marco beckoned him over, lifting him up into his arms. "We did it, Leo," Marco said, his voice choked with emotion. "We did it." Leo hugged Marco tightly, his eyes filled with tears. He was so proud of his hero. Marco had not only won the championship, but he had also inspired millions of people around the world with his story of resilience, determination, and unwavering belief in himself. He was a true champion, both on and off the track. His comeback was complete. The celebrations continued long into the night. Marco was hoisted onto the shoulders of his team, carried around the paddock like a conquering hero. Champagne flowed freely, soaking everyone in its celebratory spray. He gave interviews to the media, answering questions about his incredible journey, his recovery, and his triumph. He spoke with humility and gratitude, thanking his family, his team, his friends, and his fans for their unwavering support. He dedicated the championship to Leo, calling him his inspiration and his hero. He said that Leo's courage and resilience had given him the strength to keep fighting, even when things seemed impossible. He also spoke about the importance of never giving up on your dreams, of believing in yourself, and of overcoming adversity. He said that his story was proof that anything is possible if you are willing to work hard and never lose hope. The next day, Marco was invited to a special ceremony, where he was presented with the championship trophy. He held the trophy high above his head, beaming with pride. He looked out at the crowd, at the faces of his family, his friends, and his fans. He saw Leo, standing at the front, waving his banner and smiling proudly. He knew that he had not only achieved his own dream, but that he had also inspired countless others to pursue their dreams, to overcome their challenges, and to never give up on hope. In the days and weeks that followed, Marco's story was told around the world. He became an inspiration to millions of people, a symbol of resilience, determination, and the power of the human spirit. He received countless letters and messages from people who had been touched by his story, people who had faced their own challenges and had found strength and inspiration in his example. He visited hospitals and schools, sharing his story and encouraging others to never give up on their dreams. He met with injured athletes, offering them words of support and encouragement. He established a foundation to support young people who had overcome adversity, providing them with opportunities to pursue their dreams and to achieve their full potential. Marco's journey had come full circle. He had started as a young boy with a dream, and he had overcome incredible obstacles to achieve that dream. He had inspired a world. He had become a champion, not just on the track, but in life. His legacy would endure. The little boy from the small Italian town, who dreamed of racing, had become a legend. He would be remembered not just for his speed, but for his heart. The end.